Hello, everyone. We'll just wait a few more moments to allow some time for others to join, and then we'll get started. Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to Indiana Professional Management Group's informational webinar, Making Change Happen, Understanding Legislation and Advocacy. I'm Megan Warren, the Professional Development Specialist here at IPMG. Before I introduce today's presenters, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items related to the session. First, webinar attendees will receive an email verifying their attendance one day after the webinar. Also, the recording of this session will be posted on IPMG's YouTube channel within 2 business days. Finally, if you have a question during the session, we invite you to add it to the questions box. We'll take time at the end of the presentation to answer some of those questions. Please be sure to only add general questions. If you have a specific question about your case, you should reach out to your contact at IPMG. We'll put together a Q&A document and make it available to you after this session. Now, I'm glad to tell you a little bit about our presenters for today, Heather Sorrells and Sabra Stevens. Heather is the Director of Case Management here at IPMG, Indiana's largest HCBS waiver case management provider. With more than 20 years of experience across the waiver system, Heather is deeply committed to supporting individuals with disabilities in defining and achieving a good life. Heather is a life course ambassador, a board member of Indiana's Association for Persons in Supported Employment, and serves as chair for both the IPMG Legislative Committee and the INAPS Public Policy Committee. Welcome, Heather. Sabra Stevens is Vice President of Hallowell Consulting, where she combines her strong legal background, knowledge of the government process, and broad range of relationships to provide exemplary client service. An attorney with almost 2 decades of experience in legislative and executive branch lobbying, Stevens focuses most of her time developing and executing government relations strategies on behalf of our clients. Sabra also assists with association and program management and development. Heather and Sabra, we're looking forward to hearing from you today. Please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. And yes, I start first. Great to be with you all today. As she mentioned, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So I'll just kind of roll through this. But I'm going to cover just some kind of basics about the Indiana General Assembly and how a bill becomes a law. Next slide, please. And some of you may know this, but some of you, it's been a long time since Schoolhouse Rock. Uh, so a good refresher is helpful from time to time. So in Indiana, we have a bicameral legislature. So we have a House of Representatives and a Senate. The Senate is 50 members, 40 of which are Republicans, 10 of which are Democrats. On the House side, we have 170 are currently Republicans and 30 are Democrats. We do have an election coming up, as I'm sure you're all aware, so this could shift before we get to next session. We also have a biennial budget, so every other year is either a long or short session. We just wrapped up a short session, and then we're heading into a long budget session. So the long sessions generally go from early January to the end of April. The short sessions are generally from beginning of January to mid-March or so. We have coming up actually in a couple weeks, the Legislative Council will meet and they will announce interim study committees. So these are committees that range, a variety of topics, essentially that are, cover the standing committees and then some extra special areas. They are, of course, made of legislators and also some lay people, depending on the committee. And they will look at a variety of topics. Sometimes something's just studied, and they'll have a few hearings, discuss it, and then there's a final report that just summarizes what happened. Sometimes they actually recommend legislation and come up with some draft legislation. So we monitor that council meeting. We monitor those interim study committee topics that are impactful to you all, to see if we need to be really involved or just kind of watch how they go. A couple of years ago, well, and so several years ago, we had a special session in the summer. Some of you may remember in December this year, the legislators came in. It technically was not a special session, but they came in early to do redistricting. But essentially, the governor can call for a special session and come in and deal with topics outside of sort of the normal time of handling those items. So that happens from time to time. And then lastly, as sort of basics, a good reminder that, we do have a citizen legislature. So there are plumbers and farmers and not very many lawyers, believe it or not, doctors, physicians, builders, insurers. Most of them have their full-time job and then also serve in the legislature. And, it's part-time legislature, which everyone sort of laughs at because once you include session and then committee meetings and interim study committee meetings and all the things they have to do, it probably feels full time for them most of the time. But this also brings in the importance of advocacy, lobbying, educating, because they can't know everything. So a good reason to have advocacy at the State House. All right, next slide, please. Okay, how a bill becomes a law. So, and if you this looks complicated, it is kind of complicated, but this is a super helpful chart I think the chamber put out. So one, early December will be a bill request deadline. They'll start finalizing language, and then session will begin. And the first step that all pieces of legislation get is they're introduced. Well, if they're introduced, they all get a first reading. And a lot of times, it'll be in large packets. So they'll say bill file list, one, two, three, and it'll be several pieces of legislation that are announced at the podium when they come in early January. Most, not all, most of those will receive a committee assignment. Some of those bills then will receive a committee hearing, and in that committee hearing, the bill can, fail. The bill could be amended in committee, or it could pass out unamended. If it passes out of committee, then it's eligible for second reading. So then it goes back to the floor, and a bill can, be called down on second reading without being amended, or it could be amended on second reading. And if an amendment is up for a vote, it has to have a majority vote to be added to the bill. So then, if the bill survives that step, then it's on third and final reading in that chamber in that form and has to pass by a majority vote. So that's when there's, generally more debate amongst the chamber. If a bill survives all of those things, then it switches to the opposite chamber, and all that begins again. And the same sort of, has to hit all those marks by certain deadlines. And if it doesn't pass a step by a certain deadline, it will be dead. By the way, nothing is ever really dead until they're out and over, because sometimes things come back as amendments or later on throughout the process in conference committee. Which gets to the most complicated part of the process. So one, if a bill passes both chambers, if it was not changed in the second chamber, it returns to the originating chamber, and it's really kind of the fast track to becoming law. So it's signed by leadership and goes to the governor's office for, veto signature, or sometimes he can just let a bill become law. If the bill is changed in the second chamber, that originating chamber can file what's called a concurrence, essentially saying we agree with the changes that were made. And that concurrence has to pass in that original chamber. If they need to keep working on the bill, a dissent will be filed, and then there are four conferees that are assigned to that bill. Generally, two House members, two Senate members, and a Republican and Democrat from each chamber. Usually, a combination of the authors and sponsors. Sometimes changes are made if someone is not signing off on a conference committee report and leadership wants to make sure it gets done. Otherwise, those four have to sign. Well, let me get to one step before that. They also will have a conference committee, which is like a mini committee hearing, and they have shorter notice requirements for those. So we are part of a large group of folks that, essentially are at the State House that whole time to make sure we see if there's a posting for a conference committee hearing in 2 hours, we've got someone to cover it. So a conference committee will be held. Sometimes they're more substantive, and they may even take brief remarks from the public. More often, they are pretty quick, and they'll say, this bill has three issues with it, and those three issues are X, X, and X. And now they will recess, or I'm sorry, no, they will recess. They will not adjourn. That way, if the four conferees get together to sign, that conference committee report, they're not violating any public access laws. So they will come back. If that conference committee report is signed by all four conferees, then that conference committee report essentially becomes that latest version of the bill and goes back to each chamber where it has to pass by majority vote. Once that happens, then it, heads to the governor's office. There are a few other complicating factors that if you're really interested, I can share more about of, what if someone never signs, or what if that fails? But that end part is really can be really complex because, any bill, my favorite example, not because of the content, but because it was just an interesting process. And here's my cat. Process piece was several years ago. There was an insurance bill, a MEWA bill, that in conference committee, they call it a strip and insert. The whole content of that bill was stripped out, and they put in the constitutional carry, for guns language into that bill. So the MEWA bill became a gun bill in that conference committee. So anyway, interesting things can happen. We watch all those. We read all the reports to make sure we don't miss anything. So, all right, next slide. Okay, so how do ideas for legislation, where do they come from? How do they originate? So one, they can come from those interim study committees that I mentioned before. They can come from past sessions where something did not get across the finish line, or something needs cleaned up or further adjusted. They can come sometimes, we have separation of powers, but sometimes there may be an outcome of a court case that is not in line with the intent of the legislature. So they may look at, changing things for that reason. They, of course, come from special interest groups, associations, constituents. A lot of times we'll hear legislators say, someone in my district had this issue and I want to work on it. National policy organizations, and also their own professional background and interests. And then lobbyists, so which I get, of course, from my clients, for you all. So next slide.
All right, thank you, Sabra. Sabra just provided an overview of how legislation happens, and then her group, and then our legislative watch committee within IPMG watches a lot of bills throughout the session. And if you read our newsletters we send out, you will know all these bills I'm going to go over. But we wanted to highlight just from the past. It was a short session. It was a fast and furious short session. Some of the bills we watched and what happened with them. So what you're seeing now are bills that actually passed that we were watching. Senate Enrolled Act 1, which you've probably heard a lot about. Hopefully you're aware of. It contained a lot of language regarding eligibility and was kind of scary, I think, for a lot of people that we support because it talked about Medicaid and Medicaid eligibility. It does put into work requirements into HIP and the Hoosier Care Connect. So those are managed care Medicaid programs and not what anybody we serve is receiving. They're on traditional Medicaid. But that creates more paperwork at the DFR office. And so that could be impactful to the individuals we serve and that eligibility determination and making sure they've got that right category reflected. There were also some SNAP eligibility changes within that bill, including this kind of made a lot of news that you can't use your SNAP benefits for candy or sugary drinks anymore. Um, we then watched House Enrolled Act 1277, and as Sabra mentioned that she showed how a bill becomes a law. This is a good kind of example of when something dies, it's not really dead. So the bill started out really focusing on individuals in that Pathways program, so over the age of 60 and had probably been on the health and wellness waiver, although Pathways incorporates more than just waiver services, and living in an assisted living or long-term care nursing facility. And it wants to carve out those individuals from the Pathways program and that managed care because it was really duplicating services with the care coordination because those facilities are already doing a lot of that care coordination. And there was a lot of debate on that bill. I happened to be in the committee hearing when it was, I can't remember if it was its first or second reading in the committee, but it was spirited and a lot of long presentations. As it went through the process, language from other bills that had died got incorporated. And so this really directly impacts us in the waiver world. There is language in there about HCBS providers having to give statements to individuals twice a year, I think is where it landed in the bill. So showing what services were billed. So that's going to be super beneficial to you guys as you're doing that. Case managers are doing that service oversight and really seeing what services are being delivered. Are they being delivered in how it was outlined in that service plan? And then there is specific language related to case managers supporting individuals to review those statements. And I was at the committee hearing to speak specifically about that language and our support of it when it was in a bill that died. So it was nice that this came back around, as Saber explained. And then we also had Senate Enrolled Act 222 that passed. This is kind of a nothing burger bill for us, but it does officially impact the individuals we serve. It changed the name of DDRS to DDARS, which we've been using already and functioning under that structure already. It officially dissolves the Division of Aging and reassigns those Division of Aging functions to different bureaus within DDRS. So a lot of things went to beads with the waiver services, and that really happened. Those functions happened last summer. And then some other things that the Division of Aging did were assigned to the Bureau of Better Aging. There are a few additional provisions about licensing and things like that with home health agencies, which are good to be aware of, but aren't super directly impactful to your day to day. And then some of the other bills that we watched that did not pass, but they could come back around. You often see things that didn't pass one year be introduced the next year. And I think a lot of these things that we watched will come back around. So House Bill 1012 did not pass, but that's the one that was incorporated into House Enrolled Act 1277 with language about those statements. It originally included more language about the DFR, also sending out statements of all Medicaid services billed. It included a flex fund for the waiting list, for the waiver waiting list, to provide specific services and supports to folks on the waiting list, looking at, what home adaptations could we do, some like one-off hits to better support people while they're waiting for the waiver. The big issue with this bill, I think a lot of people thought it had a lot of great things in it, is it did not really have a fiscal analysis. So a lot of bills that get introduced, they cost money. There's an in cost to implementing whatever this change is. And so the legislature does do a fiscal, and I'm really skirting over how that process works, but they do a fiscal analysis of what would this really cost if we did this bill. The costs really weren't known. How much more would it cost the DFR to generate and mail these statements? How much would it cost to oversee that waiting list fund? And that the dollars for that fund were coming from any unspent, already appropriated dollars for waiver services. So the actual fund wouldn't cost money, but it costs money to administer and oversee it. And since those costs weren't really known and it wasn't a budget year, the bill just died. Um, there were a couple other bills, 1028 and 1074, that were actually proposing new waivers. And the waivers, the language was specific to really socioeconomic issues that affect independent living, affordable housing, access to food, things that you guys are supporting individuals with every day, to hopefully access. And these waivers were designed to provide some additional support. They would have a huge cost. Not only to provide the services, but to administer them, oversee them. And they really didn't make it out of committee because of that cost issue. There were two bills related to ABA therapy, which has been a very hot topic for the last year or so, the cost and the access to that service. Um, One was, I thought was a really great bill, and I think it will come back, was about really outlining that transition for folks that were in children, young children, in an ABA program transitioning to school and supporting that transition process in that ABA private pay or Medicaid ABA therapist um, working within the school at no cost to the school and outlining how that would work. So I think we'll see that come back. And then there was a bill specific to the state employee health plan and the reimbursement rate for ABA therapy. Neither of those passed out of committee. And then the state sandwich bill. We've been watching this for years and years, and we really thought this was going to be the year. It actually usually just doesn't even make it out of committee or get a hearing in committee. And so this was the year. It actually passed out of the Senate, and then the House just let it die. So maybe next year we'll get our state sandwich of the Tenderloin. So probably why you're really here is to learn, how to more effectively advocate. It's a highly politics affect everything in our lives, from the local, state, and the federal level, and it's a lot of in the news. But effective advocacy, it really starts with knowing where to find facts, staying informed, and building relationships. Not every issue that affects us or that you probably hear about in the news is a legislative issue. A lot of things that are impactful to you, to individuals you serve, not just in, waiver services, but your life as a citizen, are really in policy and code. And so advocacy extends beyond just meeting with the legislature, but also knowing, how the end result of what you're experiencing, what you want to change, do we need to advocate in the legislature for a law change? Do we need to talk to other officials? Do we need to advocate for policy change? And so you really need to start with knowing where to find facts and where to be educated and using fact-based sources. So if you're reading any source that it's really creating a sense of panic or fear, you probably need to take a breath and look for a different source, or review a counterbalanced opinion to really get a picture of the full issue. Uh, Social media is not a news source, although a lot of news sources have a social media presence, so it kind of grays the line there. But if it's really what you're reading is trying to obviously make you take a specific position, it's probably not a fact-based source, even if you agree with the position. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of resources to really use to stay informed and what the I use, what the IPMG Legislative Watch Committee uses, and Sabra probably has additional fabulous resources she uses too. But starting with the Indiana General Assembly website, that's really kind of baseline getting some information. You can find your legislators, your state and your federal, track bill status, watch committee hearings, which are really informative. I have, testified in committee and gone to committee hearings, and you have to wait for your bill to be heard. And I have learned a lot of things about topics I didn't really know about just listening to those committee hearings. It's been really interesting. I strongly encourage you to use our internal Legislative Watch app. We do keep summaries of bill statuses up there. There's a lot of tips and resources included, um, templates for contacting your legislators, how to find, ballot information, those kinds of things. ARC of Indiana and the ARC, the nationwide umbrella, are always fantastic resources on public policy issues specific to our field. They have summaries of legislation. The Indiana one really focuses on Indiana legislation, but they do link to ARC's legislation that really monitors federal policy. They have self-advocates toolkits on there. I'd encourage you to share those with individuals and families that you serve. They have news alerts you can sign up for. I'm signed up for all of those. So, if you don't want to read the public policy every day, but you want to know when something big's happening, that's a great way to stay informed as well. And then I've listed over there a couple, and these slides will be available, so you don't have to furiously write these all down. But some other websites where you can track legislation, and the last four I listed are specifically tools to check the ballot in your area because primaries are next Tuesday, and I encourage everyone to vote. Or if you have not registered, it's a little late for the primary, but then you can at least register for the general election in November. But you can enter your address in there, so it'll help you identify the candidates and their positions on your ballot. And that's really helpful for local elections. There's a lot of city council elections, county commissioner elections, things like that happening in the primaries right now. And I really encourage everyone to get informed about who your candidates are in your town. A lot of times, those local things that we don't pay as much attention to really impact our day-to-day life way more than what's happening at the state or federal level. So check out your candidates and make some informed voting choices. All right, I'm going to take you on a quick tour of the IGA website because, like I mentioned, it's a great first stop resource to learn more about the legislative process, what's happening. There's I just did two screenshots, but I could spend all day on here clicking through things. And when I made this PowerPoint, I found myself going down rabbit holes reading things. I read the Constitution while I was doing this. But what I've highlighted here is maybe some of your first stop resources under information, showing how to find your legislator, looking at district maps for the Senate and the House. It gives you tools on how to register to vote, how to contact your legislators. Um, you can send direct messages, and I feel like now they used to really publicize folks' email addresses, but most of the profiles now list their contact straight through the website. It'll also show you bills that they've introduced. And so you can get a feel for your representative and kind of the issues that they really support and are important to them. Every legislator, just like every person, has issues that are important to them and they promote, but your legislators want to hear from you and the issues that are important to you. So while it may not be their specific interest or wheelhouse, that doesn't mean they don't want to have a conversation about it and learn more. And then this is where I spend the first quarter of every year. And this is how I watch bill statuses. So if they are the blue, this is from this past session, those are bills that passed, and everything in gray are bills that eventually died. Some of them, again, had language incorporated into other bills, so there are pieces of them there. But when you click on that bill, you can see a short, high-level summary. You can read the full bill. You can read every version of the bill, every amendment it had. You can see all the fiscal analysis that was tied to it. I really want to highlight this because throughout each session, I get questions from folks saying, like, I heard this was happening, this was happening. There tends to be a rumor mill. And so it's always best to go back to what does the actual bill say? What is in it? There will be bills introduced that are interpreted maybe not quite how it's written. Sometimes the language in that bill is not clear enough about the intent of the bill, and so it's always helpful too to hear that when you read the bill. I'm reading that this could happen with it. And so that's what happens in a lot of those committee hearings is addressing that gray language. But if you hear rumors about a bill and you think it sounds frightening or exciting, I go first here and read what the bill actually says. And then I'm going to kick it back to Sabra to talk about building relationships. And I'm going to just give her a shout out first. She didn't know I was going to do this. Sabra has been a fantastic support for IPMG and building relationships, and she is amazing at it. If you have been at one of our days at the State House, it's continually reiterated to us how good she does with this because legislators come up, they first introduce themselves and are like, "Where's Sabra?" They
Aw.
really want to see Sabra, and it's a
Aw.
lot of legislators that say that. So
Thank you,
tell
Heather.
us how you do it.
Thank you. Well, I love working with you and representing you all, so you make it easy. I appreciate that. That's so sweet. Yeah, well, that is what maybe my top tip is is to get to know your legislators specifically. You know, my job, of course, is to know all of them. And I've been doing it a long time, so I better know them, right? But it's really, really helpful for you to know your own legislator. And on the IGA website that Heather was going through earlier, there's a tab that says, I think, find your legislator, and you can plug in your address and figure out, everyone that represents you. So, and they'll have events in your district. Sometimes those are good to go to and introduce yourself. And tell them where you work and what you do, and that can be really, really impactful. So do it all frequently. So before, during, after session. Again, educate them on your organization and the priorities that we have. And this says encourage members, but for you all, good to encourage each other to do the same thing. Because again, a quick conversation at a third house or a breakfast or even at our state house day can go a really long way. Invite them to your events if you have some kind of open house or event that is in their district. They are frequently looking for opportunities to get out and meet with their constituents. And then during session. And this goes more kind of funneled through us and through me. But certainly if you see them, and you have thoughts on a bill, you can share those thoughts. We, of course, share our official IPMG positions with legislators, but that, again, can be really impactful. This part, some of you may be interested in this, some of you may not. But, attend committee hearings and testify when appropriate. That is usually Heather and myself kind of tag team that. So we do that on your behalf, but you can also watch those online on the Indiana General Assembly website. Again, I'm so sorry, my cat doesn't come up unless I'm speaking, and then she really wants to be included. So, but on the right-hand side of the page, you'll see a calendar that will list all the committees that day, and then there's a little like video camera that you can click on and stream those and watch those. To the extent that it's appropriate, keeping media informed, writing letters to the editor or op-eds can be helpful too. And then I put review and track key legislation. So we do that, of course, for you. And Heather puts together the newsletter. There's also, like she mentioned, other excellent resources like ARC does a really nice job as well. So important to know what's going on. Next slide, please. Okay, some do's and don'ts, and these should be intuitive and might not think needs to be said, but we've seen some crazy things at the State House. But so one, on the kind of do side, clearly and simply explain your position, especially during session. Legislators have, I mean, don't we all? But legislators have very limited amount of time. So the quicker you can kind of get to the point and go through your talking points, the better. I'm gonna stand with this elevated so that I can actually speak without my cat. Um, So, quickly and simply is the best policy. And don't forget to make your ask. So, are you asking them to support it? Are you asking them to oppose it or tweak it? Make sure you include that when you're chatting with them. And I put this somewhere. Oh, I guess I put it at the end, but I'll mention it now. One, I always thank them in the beginning for their time, for meeting with me. Thank them in the middle for the meeting and thank them at the end, because again, they can have things stacked up. And so appreciation goes a long way. Of course, always be respectful and polite. Again, that goes without saying, but it's good to remember that even as, some issues can be controversial or tensions can be high. Be brief, again, to my earlier point, and invite feedback. So a lot of times what I do is go in, introduce myself, my organization, what we're asking for. And I usually say, do you have any immediate thoughts? And sometimes they say nope, and I'm like, okay, thank you. I'll be back to to find out where you are on this. But invite their feedback. They may disagree or agree with you, but it's helpful to know kind of where they stand. And always offer to, offer additional information. Make sure you follow up if you do that. They'll remember, of course, if you don't. And this is really important. Never never make up an answer. If you don't know it, or if you're not 100% sure, just say you'd be happy to get back to them. That is the best policy. And again, thank them for their time and attention. Lastly, on the don't side, again, some of these go without saying, but don't ever interrupt a legislator. And, it's just a kind of courtesy respect thing, of course, or argue with a legislator, even if there are, polar opposite of where you are, you'll get much further. It will be a much more effective meeting if you can kind of agree to disagree. Well, I appreciate your position on that. Would love for you to consider this other information. Let me know if there's anything I can provide for you, something like that. Never exaggerate or misrepresent the truth, of course. From time to time that can happen. And generally, that's when the legislator will decide not to meet with that person anymore. So that can be really harmful kind of to our overall cause. Don't lose your temper. That can be tricky sometimes if it's a, really intense issue. And I'm saying this like they're all intense, controversial issues. Most of the time, it's not. There are a lot of examples where it's not some super intense conversation. But then, lastly, in committee hearings, especially, don't cause chaos, heckle, or create disruption during hearings. My funny story I like to tell is we were in one of the smaller committee rooms once, and we had we had a client. It was not Heather, who was trying to open a bag of chips, and it was so loud that even the legislators were kind of peeking around to look. So one, bring snacks to committee hearings, but try to minimize, disruptions. And then, of course, if you're actually heckling or clapping or yelling, you can be escorted out by the state police. So that would not be fun. So I think that's it for my. Do I have one more slide or is that it?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Sabra.
You're
I do
welcome.
want to give a quick disclaimer, which I think is common sense, but we want everyone to be engaged in advocacy and public policy and encourage you as just citizens to be engaged. If it's an issue that remotely relates to waiver services or IPMG, you ask that all needs to go through Sabra and I. So don't email legislators from your IPMG email address unless it's one of our calls to action. You're sharing IPMG's advocacy page, which should be coming out soon, those kinds of things. So I just wanted to kind of run through what IPMG does for advocacy. And everything I'm talking about is hand in hand in step with Sabra and Hallowell Consulting. So Sabra meets with legislators on behalf of IPMG year round. She has a long list of meetings that she can schedules with them. and gives us updates on those conversations. I join her for some specific ones, legislators that are local to Lafayette, because our corporate office is here in their backyard, and then those that really champion our issues. And so there's a handful of those that I join those meetings as well. Um, like she mentioned, I do testify in committee hearings. So I've testified about the rate study. There's been times I've testified in committee hearings about bills that the ARC of Indiana put forth, and then we go there to support them. So really collaborating with other advocacy groups that, we have kind of similar missions and visions and are promoting that same legislation. Uh, we have a lot of collaboration with the administration in Indiana. And so that includes meeting with the governor's office, meeting with the secretary of FSSA, and Karen Brummett. She does all of those meetings with Sabra. And then Carolyn, myself, and the ADs, we do a lot of collaboration with the administration of DDARs and BEADS. And we have routine meetings and conversations with them that are more about the day-to-day advocacy and what we're experiencing out here in the field. We have a lot of partnerships with advocacy groups, and we've mentioned ARC, and that's been a fabulous relationship. Karen serves on the board. I'm on the Government Affairs Committee there, and then Karen is on the Blueprint for Change, which has been a massive, amazing group of stakeholders, individuals served, really looking at what could move our system forward. And they've had a lot of intense meetings and research, and they're going to be publishing that report publicly, I think, early fall, and really looking globally at systemic change, not just waiver services, but the whole system. So that'll be exciting to see. I'm on the NAPC board, and then lots of you are members of advocacy groups or partner with advocacy groups that are local to your community. And that's advocacy on behalf of IPMG and the individuals we serve. Uh, and then I just wanted to end with highlighting kind of what we will and will not do, because I do get questions and feedback about this pretty regularly. It's been a intense political landscape for quite a while with a lot of um, emotions, and we've all seen things that maybe we don't agree with being said by some people with some power. IPMG will never, ever make a public statement that contradicts what the local, state, federal administration has said. We will always promote and lift up things that we support, but we will never make a statement against someone for a couple reasons. Sometimes it can be a volatile and create more discord in a relationship, so that's not usually a beneficial tactic to begin with. But we are also a contractor, and we have to follow some certain rules in that contract relationship and come as a partner to the table and not an adversary. And so that's why we will never make a negative public statement. But we will make statements of things we support, things, changes we hope to see. Um, so again, I want to encourage everyone to read the legislative committee's newsletters. We do include, we're heavily state focused, but we do include some federal updates. Federal legislation moves much slower, even though it makes a lot more news. Change through that process takes a little bit more time. And of course, please remember to vote on Tuesday. So, Megan, did we get any questions during?
I do not see any questions in the questions box. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to enter in there? We have some time to respond to those. If not,
Well,
that must fantastic presentation. All the questions answered. That really was very enriching. I appreciate, I've learned some of that stuff before, but things get confusing over the years. So I really appreciate you sharing all of that information. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who took time to join us today to learn more about the legislative processes and kind of what's happening in our local environment here. Any last questions? I feel bad cutting it down now with no questions.
Oh, there's one. It
You
looks
get
like
some
there's one.
thank yous.
All right, that's nice. Thank you.
All right. We will be making this information available. So if you have additional questions, you can utilize the resources that were indicated on the slideshow. You could reach out to your contacts here at IPMG. And yeah, just stay informed, stay aware, and let us know how we can help you. We do have our next informational webinar will take place on August 14th at 10 a.m. Eastern. We're excited to welcome Beth Peabody, IPMG's eligibility coordinator. Beth's presentation will be on the topic of understanding Medicaid basics. We'll be sending out some registration for the August webinar soon. In the meantime, if you have any questions, you can let us know. We're happy to be here to support. All
Thank
righty.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.